Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Center for Innovative Hospitality, Employment, and Labor Relations, my name is Bruce Tracy, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to facilitate a conversation with three of my favorite industry HR thought leaders and learn how they've responded to the COVID-19 crisis that has ripped through our industry in a very devastating way, and hear about some of their plans for moving forward this upcoming year. Our esteemed panel includes Joy Rothschild from Omni Hotels, Nikki Massey with Hyatt, and Robert Melwig with SB Entertainment. Thank you all very much for taking time from your extremely busy schedules to share your insights with us today. Our agenda for today is as follows. We'll start with an overview of the recovery efforts that each of our panelists have pursued over the last 12 months and some of the highlights and lessons learned. Then we'll shift our focus to a discussion of the current competitive landscape, including some hot button issues that are currently keeping everybody up at night. And then we'll talk a bit about the action plans for 2021 and also talk a little bit about where y'all want to be at the end of the year if things go as planned. And then at the end, we'll also take some questions from any of the audience members as time permits. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in? And Nikki, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the recovery efforts that you pursued in the last 12 months and some of the things that were highlights for you?
Sure, I would love to. Well, first, I think everyone will agree that the industry showed an incredible amount of agility in the past year. I mean, from shutting operations down to reimagining operations, cleanliness, guest service as we reopened. And now with this sort of ramp up to recovery that is happening at different paces in different markets, that need for the consistent agility and experimentation has been unprecedented, I would say, in the last year. And I know for us at Hyatt, we had a couple of aspects of our culture that were pretty heavily ingrained that served us well during this last year. One of them is our purpose. We care for people so they can be their best. And we have been talking about that for many years with an eye towards all of our various stakeholders. And when you think about an experience like the pandemic, it's really true. There's first of all, obviously critically important, our colleagues. So making sure that they are transitioned through the shutdown in a caring manner. And we were able to do that. It's not so much what you do, but how you do it, right? So we were able to give them as much support as possible, help them find temporary jobs. Then, of course, our customers. So as we reopened operations, ensuring that our customers felt safe without sacrificing that engagement and that service that is so critical to what people love about our industry. And then also to our shareholders, right? Our shareholders and our owners, who many of whom really struggled financially during this pandemic. So striking that right balance when it comes to costs, costs of things like severance for our colleagues, of insurance for our colleagues, really working that out with them in a way that would best serve all of the stakeholders together. So that was a big part of it. And then I'll just say that the other area of our culture that we have been focused on for the last several years that unexpectedly served us very well was this idea of design thinking. So we've adapted the Stanford design thinking model in our organization, and we've really transitioned from an organization that has to put out a perfect experience right away to an organization that is focused on empathy-based design and experimentation and iteration. And I tell you, we did a lot of iteration during the pandemic, but just having that skill set in our toolbox, I think, served us really well.
That's great. Now, Joy, I know you guys have really fought hard to build a strong culture, as Nikki just described. I'm sure you have similar kinds of experiences in terms of some of those values that really served you well over the last year. Can you comment on that?
Yes. I mean, I think one of the things that is unique about Omni, and I consider it really a blessing, we have one owner. So we're an owner-operator. We were able to make decisions very quickly. I think back to the beginning of the pandemic, like our whole mantra was, this is going to be over by June. So we made a lot of decisions thinking, oh, this is 2 months, we're extending benefits, we're doing this, we're doing that. And then we realized this was a much longer road. But we're governed by something we call the trilogy, which is taking care of customers, owners, and associates. And we really tried to keep that balance. But I would tell you, as it went on, candidly, we realized by doing pulse surveys and listening to our that it was perceived that we took much better care of the people that were furloughed than the people that were left behind to do all the work. So we really needed to readjust in the third quarter of last year and think about how to better take care of the people that stayed. And it was a light bulb went off for us. And that was humbling to learn. And I would say, looking back, we made the best decisions we could make at the time, but we didn't make all the right decisions. And we made a lot of mistakes and learned from them. But I would also say it's helped us as we look forward to think about what was it about our culture that we loved. And when you think about people being out of the workforce for Omni and coming back a year later, how are we going to re-energize our internal branding and our culture? And we're actually working on that right now. Is you used to work for us, you knew what it was like, you're coming back. We have to re-indoctrinate you into the culture and make you feel like it's still the company you got furloughed from. And so we're doing a lot of work around that right now, which is a good problem to have, but a sobering problem to have too.
Sure. Thank you, Joy. Robert, I know that you haven't had the, easiest row to hoe on this whole process either. And I know that you've had some, kind of revelations throughout the process. Tell us a little bit about lessons learned from your perspective.
Yeah, happy to. And again, Nikki and Joy and I have known each other for a number of years. While we're competitors, we're also friends and colleagues. And I think the spirit of these kind of opportunities to come together is that all of us are better than any of us. And part of this story is a recovery around the hospitality industry and the thirst for people to come together around travel. Travel has a way of inspiring people in the soul and finding a higher purpose to bring customers and understanding and share stories and experiences around the world. And some of the bigger social justice movements we've all been managing both as a society and within our organizations is really the backdrop and gives us an excuse and an impetus to have travel be on the forefront of having people come together for shared purpose and values and understanding, inclusivity, and the diversity of the environments and people and the showcase of hospitality and what this industry has been about, I think is a perfect backdrop at the perfect time. So, our version of our storyline is our time is now. The world is our stage. And that's our SB belief and ecosystem. And I think it has, dual purpose in today's environment. So that's one comment. The second is that someone reminded me that normal is a setting on a washing machine. And I always think I try and keep that front and center. So we're trying to build back better and not just go back to what everybody did before. I think you're hearing that in the comments. And so how we imagine and think about those practices are going to show up, and we'll share some of those in our practices today. One of them that I think Nikki or Joy said had to do with this notion of trying to help care for people even beyond the legal requirements, because culturally it was in our code to do that. So even if we had to park them on the side or furlough or have people that were on loan to somewhere else, that might be the Amazon effect or healthcare or a rental car company or someone else that was doing grocery stores. I can tell you grocery stores are on our to recruit from list. And until I have a cease and desist order from every grocery chain in the organization and my picture's on a milk carton, I don't think I'll be successful in solving some of our talent needs. And so I think there are some practices that each of us will get a chance to learn from, including in this call.
Well, that's great. And the perfect segue into, the here and now, because this is the landscape that we're looking at here. I know you all have expressed some degree of optimism about where we're going to be at the end of this year. That brings in both very, sort of positive, but also concerning kinds of elements to your decision making. So back to you, Nikki, again, and you're looking at some of these things that are playing out right now. What are the hot points for you? What are the things that stand out in terms of either labor market conditions or your ability to go back and get those people that you furloughed or that are waiting around and maybe not really thinking about hospitality, but really concerned about it because of the vulnerabilities that they've seen. So tell us a little bit about what you're looking at in terms of the landscape view.
I have to laugh because as optimistic as I am about the industry coming back, I do lay awake many nights thinking about talent acquisition and recruitment. And I laughed before the call and said, I'm going to take notes on what Joy and Robert said so I can steal their ideas. But, the reality of it is I don't know that there is a silver bullet approach to bringing talent back to our industry. I agree with something that Joy said earlier. A lot of it is going to be about your employee value proposition. I know that the AHLA has talked about even doing a an industry-wide sort of recruitment effort to remind people that it's a wonderful industry to work in. It's warm, it's caring. It is, the pandemic is not an indicator of the overall stability of this industry. It truly is a very special circumstance. When it comes to how we're approaching talent acquisition at Hyatt, there's no one silver bullet answer. I think a little bit of it is what Robert said, figuring out where have our colleagues gone. I mean, I hope for their sake that they found a way to keep money flowing into their households. And so if they've gone to a grocery store, if they've gone to a healthcare home, reaching out, thinking about non-traditional competitors and trying to recruit that way. We've also talked about potentially setting up a giant talent exchange at Hyatt where, the people that are coming off of the ski resorts can go and work at our beach resorts and vice versa. So thinking about how we can transition talent around the organization, perhaps in a way that we haven't before. We're even thinking in terms of how do we restructure our HR office to put talent acquisition and onboarding at the forefront. And, Joy, what you said really spoke to me because our cultures are so important to us at all of our different organizations, but that culture, how do you quantify it for this next generation of talent that are coming in? And we've never seen anything like it. It's not just the hourly colleagues that are new, it's the leaders. So you really have a very limited group of people to carry that culture forward. So you've got to get pretty specific about quantifying what are the aspects of our culture that make us special and being able to articulate that to all of our new hires as we sort of rebuild from the pandemic. And
so
go ahead, sorry. Sorry, the last thing I'll say that speaks to something that Robert said earlier is from a standpoint of diversity, equity, and inclusion and what we're experiencing as a society right now, as much as we wouldn't have wished this pandemic on anyone, this actually does give us an opportunity to rebuild and invite a very different group of people to join our organization. So we can really accelerate those efforts right now. And I just don't want to see any of us lose that opportunity.
Nice. Joy, I know the social justice thing is big with you all as well as with Nikki and Robert. Are you leaning on that a bit as you're starting to look into sort of the labor force challenges that are imminent?
Yeah, yes. We're leaning everywhere. I have to be candid. We have launched a DEI council and we have a lot of efforts toward, doing recruiting at places where we didn't recruit before, like HBCUs. But I think, just to give perspective, I had 22,000 employees last March. In April, I had 1,800. I have 6,000 right now. And in the last 3 weeks, I've had 1,700 jobs open, which is absolutely terrifying. And so I get concerned about our industry and that people have left our industry for the $16 an hour job at Costco or the $15 an hour job on our Target. And I worry about how do we get those people back? And part of the challenge is getting the word out that we're hiring, but I think even more so, we've got to get our managers to change the paradigm of, I've got this job budgeted at $10 an hour and I'm going to find someone at $10 an hour. Let's move on. I think that our mindset has to be, what will it take to get you back? You were a great employee. I don't care where you went, but what will it take to get you back? And, we did things like give a PT, we paid out everybody's PTO when they left. We gave them a bonus of half of what we paid out goes right back into your bank if you come back. We're using signing bonuses. We're using referral bonuses. But to me, the hotel industry has always been very insular about where they recruit and who they benchmark against. And we've given guidance to the field, do not benchmark against other hotels. You need to benchmark against the places your people went and figure out how to get them back. And the other thing I will say that we've really tried hard to do with some success, we need more pressure on it. We had a long process to get hired at Omni. You had to talk to HR, then you talk to the department head, then you talk to the EC person. We are being told, you got to get back to us in 24 hours or we're going to go somewhere else. And so we've had to add velocity into our hiring process, which is also new and a little scary, but it's the reality of the job market today. And our CFO told me yesterday, they're projecting 4% unemployment by the end of the year. We're going to be right back where we were before COVID. So we've got to get people back and figure out how to get our hooks into them in a much more effective way than perhaps we did in the past.
Thank you, Joy. There's three questions along this topic that you guys are right on in terms of the types of things that are priority for other folks that are listening in. Question from Jerry: do you think that people will be afraid to start working in the hotel industry again or try to avoid it? And I think you've expressed the fear of that. Yes, and we've seen some defection. Another question from George Ward: do you think your key employees that were furloughed have already found a place other than the hospitality industry to work? And but the question is, do you think that will open more opportunities for recent grads? And I'm thinking, yeah, probably. I see some head nodding. You're probably going to be viciously going after those folks with a degree of vigor that we haven't seen before. And a last question along this lines from Ben Applebaum. Thanks, Ben. In the immediate future, how do you plan to combat a lack of entry-level talent? Now we're getting into this, recycle this war of talent that we've had lots of conversations with over the years. And especially, the unemployment stimulus check issue. Robert, I know you had some really good math that you were looking at yesterday, and along the way, maybe you could share a little bit about how you're looking at this through that very objective kind of lens.
Yeah, we're happy to. And I worked for someone a long time ago who reminded me that this business has been around since Christ was a child. And I always try and keep that front and center of, travel will resume and will come back, and it's built to last. And our ability to remind people on the jobs and the opportunities in a creative fashion, I think is a combination of efforts. Sometimes that's managing our competitor dynamics of trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. But I think all of us agree that it's well beyond that. If we simply trade talent, we're never going to really solve the hospitality solution. So one of our ideas we're exploring, and I'll share it with my colleagues, is should we be buying some of these other third-party ancillary companies related to staffing and buy entire organizations of people to creatively solve some of our talent needs? That would be an interesting play for us that we're thinking about. There's a audacity of math that Bruce is referencing here, and don't let a good opportunity or crisis go to waste, as told by our government. So the government, with a well-intentioned desire to be helpful, is missing the boat materially on this unemployment subsidy in some material way. And if you take somebody who is making well above 10 or 11 or 12, $13 an hour was the example I used, and they might have otherwise made $500 a week, we'll use as an example. When they were on unemployment, they were able to get some portion of their wages returned to them. Let's call that 66% in many states. Maybe that was $350 a week. Well, if you add the $300 supplement, which was $400 or $500 at one point, but now down to $300, they can sit home and stay on the sideline and make $100, $150 a week more than they were when they put in 40 hours a week in our businesses. And the problem with that is twofold. One, the only way to pressure them to come off the sidelines is to do so with high levels of economic enticement, or sort of the carrot and stick of fear of, if you don't join us now, these jobs are going to be gone. And they fundamentally know what Joy just said is the unemployment is going to be tighter. It's going to be 4% by the end of the year. So they have no impetus and no motivation to get off the sideline and come back with a level of vigor unless we are compelling. So it taps into the Nikki and Joy comments about tapping into people's why. And you have to connect people to purpose. You have to have a higher aspiration. You have to figure out how they're going to contribute and make their way through society. You have to be so compelling and so differentiated in your values that they're sticky, and there's an authenticity and a genuineness and a challenge to the status quo of how we've thought about that in the past. And all of us are experimenting on the fringes with some of these creative programs.
Joy, what does that look like at Omni? Because I know you have been really working on how your company's being portrayed. And in light of the backdrop of having, this industry that's taken a huge hit, and maybe this fear of people coming back or to come work here, even in the first place, what are you trying to do to not, sort of combat the industry brand and the firm level kinds of needs that you've got as part of your plans moving into 2021?
Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot at Omni is family. And we were in a very unique position early on. We have an associate charitable foundation that gives grants to associates in need. It's not a loan, it's just a check. And early on in the pandemic, our owner said, for every dollar that somebody donates to the Omni Circle, we'll give $5. And in the course of April to the end of August, we gave $3 million in grants to people that didn't work for us anymore. and it was thousands of people. And I think those people, well, I know those people still a connection to Omni. There were hotels that we had where the GM and the executive committee did a really good job of engaging with people. They had monthly Zoom calls, and even after you were gone, you could still do the Zoom call and hear what was going on. And I think those kinds of engagements create an emotional connection to the company that people want to see back. I think the other thing, and this was a big mistake we made, but we had a silver lining with it. We really did not do anything probably for the first 3 months around career development. If you were working for us, all that activity just stopped. And we realized it's really a big part of what connects people to their company is the opportunity. And luckily, we opened a hotel in Minneapolis in October, and we just opened a giant hotel in Oklahoma City, which you wouldn't think a lot of people are going to Oklahoma City, but they are. Opening those hotels and reaching out to all the furloughed people and saying, we're opening 2 hotels. Do you want to come back and maybe in a different city and continue your career? That gave everybody optimism. And I think the more time goes on, it felt like, oh, we're opening a hotel. This feels like pre-COVID Omni. There's opportunities here. There's a career here. The more that we do to engage with either we're helping you take care of your family, we're helping you in your career, even though you don't work for us anymore, we're still in touch with you. I think those things mean something to people. And I think we're going to lean on those things as we start to recruit people back.
Nikki, I know you've had a similar kind of strategy in trying to make sure that you connect with people emotionally as well. Yes. And take care of, some of those basic fundamentals as Joy described. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you learned as well and what you're going to continue doing for the course of this year, at least for the short term?
Sure. So it's been interesting. Similar to Omni, Hyatt stood up an employee care fund, and we extended it also to our franchise colleagues, which I thought was a nice add-on. And we gave away almost $9 million, so a little bit larger of an organization and fund. But we also did a number of things throughout the pandemic, including offering meals for colleagues to pick up. We did a fair amount, I think, to Joy's point about career development. We talked about that a fair amount. And I think we were able to provide a little bit of outplacement for some of our colleagues in terms of resume support and something Robert mentioned earlier, referrals to grocery stores, Amazon, other organizations that were hiring, always with the desire that they would give our colleagues back. We'll see if that still ends up being true. We have a really active lifestyle division with a lot of openings, so we were able to do that as well. But I think to Joy's point, a lot of it really comes down to that family and that connection. And keeping that going for the colleagues who are still working for us, so that the colleagues who are no longer working for us, our alums, recognize that family culture is still there. We just did a social campaign on our intranet called #IWearMyMask, and it was everybody listing the different reasons why they wear their masks. And so many of them said, I wear my mask so that my friends and colleagues can come back to work, and I wear my mask so that the hospitality industry can get back on its feet again. So it's a very similar story, and I think we're all struggling with the same things. And I think to Joy's point, we're all really leaning into that family culture that hospitality has as a response.
Great. One quick question comes from Gregory, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Kutrakos, asked if you are going to be mandating vaccinations for people who return to work.
I'll take that to start. For us, the answer is no. We're sensitive about individual freedoms and rights, and there's a legal dynamic that some of the government agencies have purported that it might be tolerable for organizations to mandate that, and some of that may be principally true, although it hasn't been legally tested in today's environment. So if organizations are going to take that, I personally think there's some risk inherent. But you're also seeing the debate about supply and demand and access to vaccinations confused with company policy and practices on paying for vaccinations. So this may be a little bit controversial, but our organization is not planning to pay people to get vaccinated. We're going to pay people through our current time off programs. We have time off programs that allow them to get paid time off to do that. We're not incenting them with an additional 4 hours and throwing money at it because we don't think it's necessary or prudent. Some shots require 1 shot. Sometimes people have to go for 2 shots. If they need 8 hours off versus 4 hours off, I don't think it's best that we get into, well, Marriott had 4 and Hyatt had 5 and we have 8. We're going to have 12 or 15. We're going to have what our answer is. We're going to have whatever anybody needs to encourage and promote and accommodate vaccinations so that people feel comfortable and safe working here and our guests feel comfortable and safe staying here. But I get frustrated at times, and not to pick on everybody, but high trust organizations have less policies. Low trust organizations can't have enough of them. And I think that sometimes there's this bias toward perpetualizing this around some kind of policy or practice for any number of reasons. And these are serious issues around health and safety and risks. And when you're talking about people's lives and vaccinations, I think it's important that as an industry, we don't lose sight of the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, to get people to come back safe around travel. So we're not going to take a position to mandate it. We expect that the majority of the people, just through we already know that the majority of our workforce would like to get vaccinated. And so we're not fighting it's a sort of a false narrative or false fight, I think, in the court of public opinion to suggest otherwise, at least from the data we have of the people that want to work here. I'll let Nikki or Joy comment.
Yeah, we're not mandating them either. I've had both of them. We talk about it when we have it, but we've decided, early on in COVID, I should say this, our offices reopened in May. Texas is a little different than the rest of the world, but some people wait to get
no COVID in Texas.
Right, that's what I heard.
I'm not a Texan, but I work in Texas. Early on, when we opened the office, half the people couldn't wait to get back in, and half the people said, I don't want to come in. And we adopted this mantra of, we'll meet you where you are. If you want to come back in the office, come on in. If you're more comfy staying at home, stay at home right now. If you want to come back in, but you don't want to be in the cube near your coworkers, we've got space where we can give you an office or put you in privacy. And we've taken that same mantra with vaccines. We'll meet you where you are. If you want to go get it, go get it. If you don't want to get it, that's okay too. We have safe and clean standards, but very similar to Robert, I think it's an individual choice, and we're going to respect that choice.
Nikki, you as well?
Yeah, I would agree. We're also not mandating vaccines. And to add to what Robert said, we haven't landed on a final decision about incentives or PTO or what have you, but I can appreciate what Robert is saying in that people that are truly not inclined to get a vaccine are not going to be swayed by 4 hours of pay or really by any amount of pay that you could offer them. So to me, I guess my add-on to be, and Robert and Joy are perhaps considering something like this as well, we're doing a multifaceted campaign to really help colleagues understand the benefit of getting the vaccine. So that's part of that strong encouragement. And we're particularly leaning into some of our diverse communities where trust in the healthcare center system might be an issue, and setting up panels to speak to specific communities around the world particularly to encourage those communities to go and get their vaccines.
Can you expand a little bit in terms of how this plays out when you're dealing with organized labor as well? When you have some of the are you cooperating with unions around this? Or I know it's part of the equation here. Just as a point of interest, what is the relationship with the union in terms of your stance on vaccinations?
I think by and large, the union feels similarly to us in that the quicker we can get colleagues vaccinated, as many as are inclined to do so, the quicker our industry can get back up and running. So that is a a point of agreement between us and our labor unions. And we have had some different negotiations about the potential for paid time off or incentives, and they vary a little bit from local to local. But I think in large part, we are in agreement that the sooner we can get whatever it takes to get back up and running benefits our whole ecosystem.
Got it. I have a wonderful question from Patricia Lizarazo. She says, I left the industry and joined the healthcare industry. I would love to come back, but I'm concerned about job security. How are you addressing job security? Wonderful question. Robert, you want to take that one? Or start? Because I know there's perspectives on this one that will vary.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a couple of comments. First is we're exploring, and we've actually piloted a different doctrine around employment at will. And we've removed some of those traditional barriers around the employment relationship that give people more comfort. I think a little bit of this is captured in the comments Nikki and Joy shared, and I'm going to attribute it really to more about Maya Angelou in the wake of the world we're in today. It's more about people forget what you said, forget what you did. They don't forget how you made them feel. And I think all of us are building companies and cultures on this values-based ecosystem around speed of trust and how we make people feel. And I think that shows up in policy and practice. So even if we were at the delivery end of unpopular conversations, and all of us were, we cut well into fat, we cut into muscle in our organization and organs that were important for our lifeline. And I think we're all sensing that. They saw how people were treated, and there were economic policies and practices and support systems, and the government, I think, creates a little bit of help around that. But for us, we're actually trying to evidence that through practices like stay interviews. And we've talked about this before, but instead of doing a lot of exit interviews, it's kind of Joy's comment about, do you take care of the people that are gone or the people that are stay? And the answer is both, but sometimes you forget about the people that are there. And so I think we've tried to rebalance and reprioritize, caring for the people that are here and making them feel like there's some level of security. And the security comes in those conversations on what we call the 4 C's of career, comp, culture, communication. Where are you today? How are you learning and growing? How are we helping to facilitate that? How are we paying you today? And how can we accelerate your compensation opportunities? What feedback do you have for us on the culture and how we're doing and meeting your expectations and the evolution of our culture and communication? How's your supervisor and your manager and our tribe and our team that you're a part of? And I think those behaviors help get to the question behind the question from the person that asked it of, how do I feel safe? How do I feel secure? And it's sort of the Maslow theory of hierarchy of needs. There's a lot of things that get into that foundational pyramid that are part of how we build great companies. And I think talent and culture in HR is an architect for how we do that.
Joy, you want to talk a little bit about the job security question and some of the things you're trying to do to give people a little bit more sense that they're going to be a little better insulated?
Yeah, so if the Patricia Lazaro that asked that is the same Patricia Lazaro that worked at the Omni Virtual Place, I love you, and we know you. But I think, Patricia is someone that, and I'll talk about her specifically because I think this is still very real. It depends on how mobile you are. I think your job security depends on what you're willing to do in the industry, because as we've learned with COVID, there are no guarantees about anything. And I have people in my company whose jobs were not needed, their hotel closed, and they're still working to this day because they're running around helping with openings, and they're going on task force, and they're saying, well, I was an HR, training manager yesterday, and today I'm willing to be an admin to the GM just to keep working. And so I think, unfortunately, the reality of our industry is there are going to be these peaks and valleys of occupancy and demand. And I think that the more flexible you are and the more you diversify your skill set, the more job security you have. That may sound a little old school, but I think it's a very authentic answer to how I see talent being used. And, we just sold a small group of hotels that no longer reflected our portfolio. And we had people in those hotels that I absolutely adore and that we would have loved to have moved. And we had people that just didn't want to move. And so, now they're with a new company that purchased these hotels. But I do think your willingness to be flexible, especially early in your career, buys you more security. I'm happy to anyone to argue that point with me, but that's how I see it.
Nikki, how about you? Thanks, Joy.
Yeah, no argument, Joy, and I agree with everything that Robert and Joy have said, and so I won't even try to enhance those really great answers. I will just add that if you are joining the industry now, you are joining an industry that is in the process of being redesigned to be fit for purpose today. So whatever accelerations have needed to take place in our industry for a while, in terms of job design, in terms of technology, in terms of job combination, in terms of management career pathing, and complexing of roles, that is happening now. So you are walking into an industry that is fit for purpose in a way that it has never been before. So I would say that is it is actually a great time to rejoin, because how often do you get a chance to rebuild everything from scratch with an eye towards the future?
So how far are you guys willing to go in this domain? For example, a question came from Lynette Brown. Are there any positions available that you are going to promote that allow people to work from home? Project management or audit is an example. What about the use of gig labor? You mentioned flexibility. What are your thoughts? I mean, how far would you go with regard to some of your staffing and employment models to make sure that you can cover as many different bases as necessary? Robert, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution for old school managers and more traditional managers who have measured, sort of butt and seat time, and it's forced a new sort of memory muscle development, organizational, dexterity on the virtual workforce, and people have gotten comfortable with it out of necessity versus choice. So I like that. I think it's one of the unintended consequences of our environment and our circumstance, and certain jobs in the organization allow us to tap into talent and mobility, and I think they have real impact on retention and frankly compensation. People can move to a low cost of living, warmer weather state with no state tax and do the same job, and allows us to access talent and people and provide for more meaningful connectivity to an organization. So I think all of us are going to find ways to do that. Not all jobs allow for that, right? Because the business is serving customers. So the majority of our people are delivering a customer-oriented experience, physically touching, food product and the customer experience directly. But we can create more flexibility, and I think we've all learned how to adapt to do that. And I'd say a couple of things. One is the mobile technology all of us as competitors have enabled is enormous. There's been some real great innovation, and we could each tell you about all the vendors we're using and exploring. But our company has been a part of Accor, which is one of the largest hospitality companies in the world. We've announced a public transaction for Ennismore, which is the Hoxton Group we're acquiring. So today we are actually the largest lifestyle company in the world today as we integrate these companies. And we wouldn't be where we would be without mobile technology. I know Nikki has it at Hyatt because I've seen it. It's pretty cool. Joy, I know you have it as well. And these partners of Glint and Beekeeper and Workplace at all of our companies are doing some really fascinating things to keep people connected in ways well beyond what you see in terms of the infomercial and the spoof on Zoom and how many blue jeans meetings can we have, and we actually make fun of that. We bring fun and humor into our workplace, and we had a meeting the other day where we have fun Zoom bingo where people are on a call, and if someone has like the phone on mute, we check a thing. If dog's barking, check a thing, and we give people prizes for bingo when we're kind of spoofing the virtual world. But we have learned new practices, and we've adapted some of that will stay where it makes sense.
So let me ask Nikki and Joy, are you both going in that more automated route and making conscious choices about the work that people will do versus the work that will be automated or technology enabled?
Yeah, I mean, I think to get to your earlier question, one of our operations leaders is spearheading setting up our own gig economy. So rather than going to, I think there's one called Shift Up or something, but creating our own Uber platform for help because we need it. And I love that did not come out of HR, that it came from somebody in operations that loves techie stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think that this has been a great awakening for the industry in so many ways. First of all, we were all forced to work remotely, and nobody ever thought you could work remotely in the hotel industry, but guess what? We all did it. I think we would be crazy to think we're going to get talent without flexibility. So that's been a great thing for us. And yes, we are working on that. And I also think even where we had some flexibility before, I think this has been a great equalizer. I do not ever remember in my career being in a meeting and having a male colleague with his two babies on his lap having a business call, or saying, I'm going home for lunch because my wife has a Zoom call and I have to watch the kids. Even though you were allowed to do that as a woman, I don't think women did it as much as they could have until they saw men doing it. So I think the pandemic has also empowered people in a strange way because Zoom showed that husbands are carrying the load too, and it's okay. If my CFO is doing it, it's okay for me to do it.
That's great. Nikki, how about you guys? Are you seeing a similar kind of approach? I mean, you said flexibility is the sort of the key word of the day. How is this, playing into your decisions about, job designs and HR planning?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with, as always, with everything that Robert and Joy have said. I think we're going to push the envelope with technology, and we're going to push the envelope with flexibility. As far as we can push it without affecting stakeholder experience. As we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about the other day, I had a conversation with an HR director who said, I want to move from this cold climate to a warm climate, but I still want to be the HR director for my hotel. And in my head, I'm going, no, it'll never work. And out of my mouth says, try it, prove me wrong. Here's a couple of caveats, go do it. Let me know how it goes. Well, if it doesn't work, we'll fix it, right? So I just think we have to be, even things that we never dreamed we would do, we have to be open to those things, just in a way that we never have before. I also think our hard charging 24/7 work hard, play hard culture, it's in an interesting transitional space too. And part of that is really for your own wellness and your own sake, similar to the babies on the lap, right? Why can't you take a call? Why can't you take a walk while you're having a Zoom call? Why can't you log in at 10 a.m. because that's what works best for your schedule now, and continue to work at 7 or 8 p.m.? It doesn't have to be the 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 core hours plus. And that has been something I think really challenging for some of our more traditional thinkers to do, because I think we all have a sense of, this is how I've always done it, and I feel guilty if I'm not logged in from 11 to 12 because I took a walk. But when you think about how much time you give to our industry at night and on weekends because of how deeply you care, why can't you extend that care to yourself and to your family? So a lot of dialogue around wellness relating to that.
So that's part of your flexibility model.
Yeah.
It's not just the tasks, but how we then manage those competing demands. That's lovely. What about, you mentioned earlier this desire, and Joy, you said training and development kind of went the wayside there, the beginning, and now you're probably ramped up significantly. With this flexibility in mind, how does that inform or change your learning and development and even incentive or performance management systems?
So those are great questions. Incentive, let me speak of that first. We've completely changed our incentive plan for 2021. We've made it much more discretionary. It's going to pay out more frequently. We've told people what we're going to look at, but we want people who are in hotels that are running 11% occupancy to feel like they have a shot at a bonus check. So we have tried to reimagine for 2021 what an incentive plan looks like. We just rolled it out, got rave reviews. We also have had a discretionary component to our incentive. So every GM has a pool of money that they can give to people who are non-incentive eligible when they do extraordinary things. We've added significant dollars to that pool in 2021 because you may have a junior manager working 10 days straight or doing crazy shifts or covering 40 hours in a 4-day period. We have to have a way to take care of them. So we have redesigned those things. Training and development, it's taken us a while to mentally get out of the paradigm that the best training happens when you're sitting in a room with 15 people and you have all this engagement going on. And so we're looking much more at online training or mobile training, things that you can do to expedite the training and let someone do it on their own time. But what I don't want to replace, and what we dropped the ball on and what we want to resume, is the talks that Robert referenced, which is there's nothing more meaningful than sitting down with somebody saying, I care about your career, where do you want to go, and how can I help you get there? That's what we dropped the ball on in the past 12 months, and that's what we need to reinvigorate, because that's what keeps people loyal, and that's what keeps them energized about your brand.
Robert, how about you all? Thank you, Joy. Are you also investing or tinkering with your learning and development systems now that we know that some of the learning that Joy mentioned can be facilitated pretty well and effectively in a virtual kind of environment, especially for a lot of the knowledge-based kinds of things? Certainly more difficult when you're talking about behavioral skill development, but what are your thoughts on and your training plan for the upcoming year?
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts. One, just back to the last comment on the virtual training in the workforce, because it struck me. So our company is headquartered in Paris. We have 5,000 hotels, and we're opening almost a hotel a day globally around the world, which is extraordinary when you think about it. So there are opportunities, and I think that goes to Joy's comment. If you're willing to travel, we're opening the SLS in Dubai in 3 weeks. So anyone on this call that wants to go to Dubai, please, text me and email me. But some parts of the world are really experiencing tremendous growth, and other parts haven't reopened, and there's significant lockdown and concern. So it's that talentmatch.com perspective, and I just thought that was a great comment, Joy, that we ought to reinforce to people, because the more open and fluid and flexible you are, this industry is certainly for you. On the training side, a couple things. One, we are blending in this notion of diversity and inclusivity, equity into our training and learning at all levels where we have an opportunity to do it. So we were delivering training within the talent and culture HR piece on employment practices. And we've been able to find ways to rationalize in unconscious bias training as modules or stories or workshops and blend that into our training. So as part of a bigger movement of how you really embed diversity and inclusivity into organizations, we're using the L&D platform as learning opportunities to do it. Two, we're tying sort of accountability to it. So we believe our time is now, and again, in a similar vein around some of these big subjects. So people's incentives are tied, and this is controversial, to how many and growth in percentage of women and BIPOC leaders we have in the organization. And there is no time other than now. So you are going to get incented around the prioritization we're going to take as an organization to put money and dollars and incentive behind helping to drive outcomes, or we're matching that with really comprehensive understanding and training, which is a really critical balance. So how you get down to the core of unpacking how people learn and who they are and how they grew up, and it takes a lot of effort. And so it's not a classroom, it's not virtual, it's all of that. It's a combination of assessments and a learning journey that I think each of us are compartmentalizing that of these smaller, more bite-sized increments in which people can consume content and explore and try and experiment and sometimes fail and apply and then relearn. And so it's this whole sort of right brain, left brain of how do we get better together. And we have to match people. It's the notion of what we've talked about for years, Bruce, on just blowing up the traditional performance review process, because it's not how the human mind is wired. It's not wired that way. So we have to be able to flip our organizations to respond to how the brain is wired. There's a great business book, by the way, called Algorithms that I just read. I just found it fascinating, but it's a book on that same premise that really talks about how the brain makes decisions, and those kind of learning opportunities well beyond the hospitality industry, if we sprinkle them into our business, I think are the kind of things that are the nuggets for innovation that are going to have this group kind of challenging each other. And at some point, we have the HR and Hospitality Conference in September. So big infomercial plug for those who want to come and hear us again. But by Nikki, enjoy a glass of wine. More than welcome to have many people join us as you can, and help us get better together. And by September, we'll have solved one of these big items, because we're going to do it together. Someone's going to have a breakthrough. We're going to share it as a best practice, learn together. And this is sort of the spirit of the question. We have to learn together.
So Nikki, fast forward to September, where would you like to be, from a functional leader, and what would you like, to have, under your sort of list of accomplishments by that time?
Sure. Oh gosh, where do I begin? It's funny. I made a long list of goals for my team this year, and when I shared them with my business unit leader, he said, "If you can get 75% of this done this year, I'll be really impressed." And it's true. I know that in HR, similar to our operations partners and our finance partners, we are looking at a way to completely redesign the way that we work to ensure that the activities that are not immediate value add to our colleagues are stripped out of the office. So I'm coming after everything: payroll, automation, system feeds. And interestingly, some of these are ideas that we've been trying to push for years, but there wasn't the organizational context to really listen. So we really are working to strip the administrative work out of the offices so our leaders can focus on customer service, colleague onboarding, all the things they need to do this year. And I'll say from a learning and development standpoint, I think in addition to the different things that Robert and Joy both covered, I think there's also an opportunity to reposition some of our day-to-day activities and some of this job redesign and colleague relations and culture. I think there's an opportunity to position this as a learning experience for our leaders and really help them to think about it that way and measure it, right? So I'm going to try X idea, and these are the business metrics I'm hoping to move, and this is how often I'm going to check in, and this is how I'm going to iterate, and this is how I'm going to bring the colleagues along until you get to success. Like, to me, that's a resume builder that Again, we didn't ask for the pandemic, but if I were to take a positive away from it, our leaders have experienced resume builders that we hope they'll never experience in quite the way again. And that is part of your learning and growth. And being able to articulate those experiences that way, I think it's just another way that we can bake learning and development into their experience. I might have lost track of your question, Bruce.
Just where you wanted to be, and if you sat, in September looking at your accomplishments, if you accomplished, if you say 75%, those top bucket items right there, what you're sort of you're more diverse, you've got more engagement, you're winning the talent war. I'm sure those are the highlight
all
issues,
those things,
sure.
Please.
Gotcha. Joy, how about you?
Candle.
Yeah. We'll celebrate in a variety of ways at that time.
Right.
Joy, how about you? If you were looking back at that time and said, yeah, I'm pretty happy with what's gone on, what would be the things that you'd be reflecting on?
Yeah, I think to me, winning the talent war means the customers that are staying with us are having a great experience and the service is good. So that to me is probably the biggest threat to the company right now, is because we have demand. Demand is back. So, and I've got resorts where you never would have known COVID ever happened. And so are the customers having a great experience because the place is staffed? That would be, and two would be, and it's directly related to one, have I kept our A players?
Right.
Have people that have been with us all the way through, are they staying with me? Or are their cars screeching out of the parking lot the economy gets better? So do I have my hooks in those people? And the third thing for me is, just the timing was very, very serendipitous, but we had engaged McKinsey to redesign HR. And I had a plan that took me through 2023. That plan is in place now. We were able to accelerate because of COVID. But by the same token, I want to make sure that the people in the field feel that the new HR service center, that the corporate HR team, are we still meeting your needs? And so while on paper we did all this a lot faster, is it working for you, and are we still providing the value? And so to me, winning the talent war with service, A player retention, and the people still feel that my team is delivering what they need to get their jobs done.
Thanks, Joy. Robert, how about you? If you were reflecting back and thinking about how you could pat yourself on the back, what would you be congratulating yourself about?
Yeah, good. I echo everyone's comments already. I think there is the business of hotels and the hotel business, and they're not always one and the same. And I think people have had a lesson in the business side of hotels, and sometimes that's some of the things people don't see about Warren Act and foreclosures and deed in lieu and owner pressures, and what do you mean they have capital and debt on this property, and what's a PPP loan and FFCRA and initials, and it goes on and on and on. And so there's a lot that helps make this business complicated and diversified and fun. And as Nikki said, these are learning opportunities for people that they would have never otherwise had. They're really priceless moments that hopefully shape them as leaders in the future. But we have to get back to as Joy said, the hotel business, which is, at the end of the day, we have customers, and we're in the business of turning moments into memories and creating these experiences for people that choose us based on brand and experience and delivery. And so if there's not enough people to fold the towel or deliver the sandwich, and it takes 27 minutes because we were understaffed to get something, and it's not quite as hot as it should have came out of the kitchen. It's all of those special tiny moments that hang together the experience and create value. And the talent and culture and HR people sides of the business are enablers to the business, but the business is ultimately around the customer. And the more we align and focus our metrics around that, I think there's really a lot of wisdom in what Joy said. And then I think both Nikki and Joy said the retention of key talent, right? We not all talent is equal, but we know who our top talent is. We want to make sure we love them, care for them, create something so compelling and sticky that we turn it into raving fans. It's the way in which we measure that sort of net promoter score from a customer standpoint. We used to just do it in a more traditional way, and we've turned it into this kind of megaphone shouting mechanism to figure out how vocal and how loud those voices can be of people that have an affection for our company and our brands.
Nice. One last question that I'd like to throw to each of you is, and I spin on what Michelle Sarkeesian just threw over on a question here. And that's about what was mentioned briefly earlier about innovation and things that you have learned that are really, in your minds, distinctive. And the question is, do you have any methods for employees to bring innovation into the organization that you might not have had previously that are now going to be exploited as you move forward? So maybe I'll ask Nikki to talk a little bit about your efforts to facilitate this new and different effort, because we've had to be very open-minded about the ways in which we go about our different and respective positions.
Yes, agree. We've always utilized design thinking as an opportunity for colleagues to bring ideas forward and to work them through that design thinking process, right? So doing your empathy interviews, iterating, testing, iterating again, measuring. So that remains a process that's very embedded in our culture, and that's something that's still playing out at our hotels every day.
Great. How about you, Joy?
Yeah, I would say survival in 2020 necessitated invention. We may not have had the most formal vehicles to do it. Our hotels were incredibly innovative in how they delivered housekeeping and F&B where we had it, and staffing. And so I don't know that we've done a great job of capturing all of that, but it happened out of necessity, which I guess that's what they say, necessity is the mother of invention. We saw close.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you have to work within the context that you inherit, and you have to figure out how to make the lemonade out of the lemons that you've been dealt. Robert, may I ask you this? Maybe some of it is serendipitous. I know what you learn along the way. You can't always plan around, but you mentioned maybe even driving this through metrics. You mentioned diversity, inclusion, and holding people fully accountable for those kinds of things. Excuse me. Are you also thinking about the same for pushing, new and different or innovation? Do you give people, an incentive for innovation, or is this something that you're trying to cultivate and develop in a different fashion?
Yeah, we do some pretty cool stuff on innovation in three areas. One is we actually have a corporate strategy group that is a repository for how we bubble up and can capture ideas. And we have a culture that finds ways to recognize and celebrate awards. So we have the kind of typical awards and stage setting there. The biggest challenge I have, and I haven't figured out a way to do it, is sometimes people are less likely to take somebody else's great idea and just implement it. So our challenge tends to be shopping really good ideas as opposed to just everybody else wants to create the next idea and sort of be the next serial entrepreneur themselves and just say, here's all the great things that we did and percolate it up and get recognized. And we have to do I think we can do a better job celebrating how you import and translate somebody else's best idea and build upon that and kind of scale that in our organization. So we have some work to do there, but we're trying to build a better mousetrap, as we say.
I see Nikki and Joy nodding their heads vigorously in agreement. I think that's certainly something that's going to be very challenging to bake in and institutionalize. But I'm really happy to hear you guys are putting your arms around it and attempting to figure out how to manage it directly. That's great. Awesome. Well, I think we've covered our agenda. We're about a minute away from the top of the hour, so I don't want to, again, take too much of your busy time, because I know as soon as you're done, you gotta put your heads right back to the grindstone and start taking care of business. So I do, again, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Joy's buying drinks in September, so come on.
I am.
All right. Well, I'll be there. Looking forward to it.
Yes.
So thanks again very much for sharing your insights today. It's been just a blessing to spend the time with you all today, and I wish you all the very best. And thanks to everybody who's hung out with us this afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you're located. Glad you were able to join us today, and I hope you're able to get something of value. Again, thanks on behalf of the Kyler Institute and Cornell University. Thanks very much for joining us today, and take care and all the best.
All right.